I'm Mary Beth Gardam. I'm the chair of the Women, Money, and Democracy Committee. I'm presenting this session along with our partner, Rickey Gard Diamond of An Economy of Our Own. I've been really impressed with the session so far, and I'm delighted that our session can offer a somewhat more hopeful and upbeat idea of the future based on the work of so many innovative young women who are doing exceptional work to make a more fair and equal economy. Just to show you a little bit about what our committee is involved with, let me show you our screen page, our webpage. This is our logo, and you can see that we're doing a lot of work. This is who we are, how we work, committee priorities, and our current projects. Our long-term project is corporate personhood, and a lot of you are familiar with that, but we're trying to dust off and reuse our corporate study course and timeline of corporate constitutional rights, because guess what? Those are still really, really difficult threats for democracy, uncontrolled corporate abuse of power. And you'll see that in addition to the study course and the timeline, there are many plays that are easy to mount in your own community. And the arts are a great way to entertain and educate at the same time. This is the 50th year since the Powell Manifesto, and we give you a link to that. These are our allies that we're working with. And we're working on a special project on public banking and confronting corruption. We have a public banking toolkit that you can access there that lets you dip your toes into the subject of public banking without actually reading a 300 or 400 or 500 page book about it. There are lots more things going on, including our work with Rickey and An Economy of Our Own, working for a feminist economic system change and feminist economic literacy. So without further ado, let me turn this over to Rickey, and she'll tell you all about the great and positive things that we've got going, giving a megaphone to young women who are doing really wonderful things.
Yes, we asked for an hour and a half because we have wonderful young advisory board members that we were hoping were going to be able to join us, but both Jhumpa Bhattacharya and Carmen Rios were busy traveling and so won't be able to join us, but we're sure that you're going to have lots of questions, and we'll spend some time discussing the economy, because behind all of the political issues that we're talking about in the Middle East and in the international food systems versus the local food systems, there are economic issues at stake here. And that is an area that I think is probably still the best guarded patriarchal institution. Economists, bankers, policymakers in Washington, D.C. who are dealing with monetary policy and so forth. That is a pretty exclusive male club still. And so what we're hoping to do at An Economy of Our Own with the help of WILPF, which has been such an important ally for us in our alliance that you'll learn more about in a minute. We just have, I've lost my train of thought here. What was I saying, Mary Beth? I was talking about how important WILPF has been to our alliance. And I know that we're hoping that we want to expand women's issues into this realm of beyond pay equity. Pay equity is pretty basic, and how long have we been talking about that, right? So we want to begin to make, to help women become more confident and more assertive in the realm of macroeconomics and macroeconomic policy that is now very male dominated. So we want to make this conversation and consciousness raising for women from all stripes. And so all stripes are necessary for what we want to do. So because I'm a nervous Nelly, we recorded all of this. And so we're going to share a slideshow with a video of 5 conversations, women-centered conversations about the economy that we sponsored, and also a new project that we're excited about. So with that, Ellen, would you be kind enough to share the link that has our video on it? And then afterward, we'll be open to your questions, which I hope you'll have many, and we'll have a lively discussion. Hello, my name is Rickey Gard Diamond, and I want to welcome you to the presentation titled Working Our Way Out of the She Cession, Creating an Economy of Our Own. Thank you so much for finding time in your life, and thank you to our partners, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, for inviting us here to meet you. WILPF has been connecting human rights and economic justice to the quest for peace since 1915. An economy of our own began only last year and would never have gotten this far without WILPF's vigorous support, especially your Issues Committee, Women, Money, and Democracy, headed by Mary Beth Gardam, who's on our advisory board. She and I are going to come out from behind this wizard's curtain along with Carmen Rios soon to answer questions and talk with you. But you're wondering, why did WILPF partner with a feminist economic organization? Well, both our organizations see the way a ruthless capitalism grows more ruthless to the benefit of a few, whose wealth is made only of paper and often of fraud. We could measure our nation's success by how well we lift everyone up, but only if we organize to show how and demand it. That takes education in a realm that some women find boring or intimidating. We're determined to change that. So let's start. First, we want to acknowledge what is seldom talked about in economic circles. Women did not invent this economy or its tools or rules. The patriarchy did. Our economy is the product of a man-to-man discourse that is about 2,400 years old. That's when this word oikonomia was coined by the Greeks. It meant household management because the economy functioned exclusively there that long ago. But today, the patriarchy's popular story of economics looks like the image on the right. There are no women anywhere in money's evolution, at least as some men tell it. Here is a bigger gendered story. Consider these 3 stages in Homo sapiens' economy. Paleolithic Venus of Willendorf was carved with stone tools from a woolly mammoth tusk 30,000 years ago during the Ice Age. So apparently we were important. Neolithic Ceres, holding a sheaf of wheat here, was goddess to the Romans. As the climate warmed up 12,000 years ago, women began planting seeds. And here is modern liberty. Not even 250 years ago, the colony's richest men declared independence from King George while holding slaves, killing natives, and marrying women under whose rights and property became his under common law. Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations that same year, 1776, founding modern economics. 100 years later, and all women had gotten for their trouble was this statue. Now, consider women's economic contributions. Women first twisted fibers into thread and cordage, wove carrier bags for babies and gathering food, invented looms with stone weights for weaving cloth. Imagine the Ice Age without that technology. This is an outdoor oven. Women's agriculture led to her firing clay pottery to store surplus food and bake bread about 8,000 years ago. The patriarchy's wars date back only 5,000 years, and I find that something of a comfort. Oikonomia, even younger. Very recent is men's industrial revolution, fueled by burning coal and oil. This labor-saving circular saw was invented by Tabitha Babbitt, who attached it to her spinning wheel. By then, men had mechanized women's textiles and were cooking food in tin cans, getting rich by transforming female producers into what they called consumers. The key takeaway here: women were the first property. Our reproductive powers and labor controlled by force, law, religion, and custom as wives, concubines, and slaves, the past 5,000 years were the foundation of every so-called civilization and its wealth. Rape and control of women's bodies is still weaponized and used to devalue us. Wives, concubines, and slaves competing for male-controlled survival cast a long shadow. Let's think about recent history. This is a picture of world-famous contralto singer Marian Anderson in 1939, giving a famous concert at the Lincoln Memorial. She's outdoors because she'd been denied a concert at Constitution Hall. Her race was the reason. The hall's owners were the daughters of the American Revolution. Not the daughters of the Confederacy, mind you, the white New England Mayflower daughters, and despite the 13th, 14th, 15th, and 19th Amendments to the Constitution by then. Now citizens, no longer property, women's hard-won rights remain intersectional. Systemic racism carried a cost to us women. Divided, our voting rights are a question today, and so is our right to choose motherhood or not. We need to confront our whole history. First, women, black and white, won education that had been denied them, but the property rights we later won were white. Racial division separated women to the advantage of the patriarchy. So why do I say that? Well, this image is from my lifetime, the 60s, very, very recent. You've seen this world on Mad Men. It still appears to be the ideal of evangelicals and the Republican Party. No self-respecting Black woman, Latina, or lesbian would put up with this, and neither did any of the women who began the second wave of feminism. And yet, systemic sexism and systemic racism still divide and conquer. And here's what I mean. First, white women gained rights to vote as citizens, but because she didn't support her darker-skinned sisters, it took another 45 years for them to vote. And now today, after so much progress for so many, we're all threatened with losing hard-won rights, including our new economic status. Here is the latest census figures on wealth by racial group. Now, wealth isn't just our paychecks, it's our property. This is family wealth, not individual income. So can you guess which amounts apply to white, Latina, and Black households? Yes, white families have 10 times the wealth of Black families, nearly that of brown Latina families. When we allow ourselves to be divided like this, who wins? Not women, not most of us. None of these numbers is very large in the big picture of millionaires, billionaires, and now trillions in budgets. If you think we've outgrown that man at ease in this picture, take a look at this guy. We haven't. He's still with us. This is Blaise Bernays, a character that cartoonist Pico Todd and I invented for my book, Screwnomics, How the Economy Works Against Women and Real Ways to Make Lasting Change. Screwnomics is my word for economan's unspoken but widely applied economic theory, I guess, that women should always work for less or even better for free. It's like he believes women are still his property somehow. Economics, banking, and money remains a man's world. And the bigger the pile of money, the fewer women you're going to see. Women won the right to open a bank account without their father or their husband co-signing with them in 1974. Yes, that recent. And today they work in banks, they might even manage a bank, but money still speaks in a male voice. The rules and tools remain his. Look at New York stock market's trading floor and Wall Street. Yes, Janet Yellen became the 15th head of the Federal Reserve in 2014 and now heads the Treasury. But is it progress or camouflage? I wonder. Our present world of money is still owned by men of a particular race, a particular class, a particular Ivy League education that assumes his right to profit no matter who pays. His bro world and his backroom enterprises are sometimes criminal, but he rarely pays a price. If he crashes the economy, he and Janet are going to survive nicely. You and I won't be so lucky. Now, your father or son or brother might work in this money world, and he's not the economan I'm talking about in Screwnomics, because economan is a mythical ideal that you and the men you love need to be wary of, because he's not good for any of us. Like new corporations today, he's a charming, narcissistic sociopath. Now, back in 1929, the British writer Virginia Woolf advised a younger woman writer what she needed to think her own thoughts and find her own voice. She needed an income and a room of her own. It became a famous feminist essay. So tired of decades of talk about pay equity, I founded an educational nonprofit alliance of women economic activists with a similar idea. We believe women also need an economy of our own. The patriarchy's economy competes in constant war. Its winners require a great many losers. It's wrong-headed thinking. As I said, I'm not an economist. Trained in language and literature, I studied economan's words. I wrote Screwnomics and won some awards and medals from the National Newspapers Association and the Indie Book Publishers for women's issues and investigative reporting. They cited my unusual sources, but they weren't unusual. They were women who rejected injustice and business as usual. Like our foremothers, they were innovators. You can go to our webpage to learn more about the women activists on our advisory board. They're all terrific. Most are associated with innovative organizations founded by women, like Jane Addams in the case of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, or WILPF, and often to create women-centered solutions. Our purpose at AEOO is to lift up economic solutions that women are already doing. How could we make them more widely recognized and create a kind of economic think tank, a platform, and a megaphone? Supposedly, women would rather talk about death than money, but we women believe women are discouraged from thinking and talking about economics. We're building a widening community of women who support one another in women's ways of learning about economic issues. We intend to raise a chorus of voices together instead of each woman being another Cassandra at Troy warning of disaster. We have to be listened to this time. An economy of our own planned to go public with an event last summer, and then COVID happened. Our plans went out the window, the way they probably did for you too, right? So what could we do? Well, we created a Zoom of our own. We put smart women together to talk about economics and connections they saw despite their different interests and their intersectional experiences. Diversity was essential. Now, I know you can't read these slides, but we talked about cooperative ownership of businesses and publicly owned banks, We talked about the GDP and its making caring invisible, and the need for vital new measures like the social wealth index. We envisioned a future with living wages, childcare and education, local farming and food security. We talked about rethinking money's purpose, who controls our currency, and collaborative investments, whether private or public, instead of current gambling and gaming. We tackled the climate crisis and the need for circular economic models that mimic natural cycles. You can find these talks and their definitions and resources on our webpage, which has links to An Economy of Our Own's YouTube channel and our blog at Medium. Planning to share with you, we wondered if we'd find patterns in these first conversations. Are there distinctive women's ways of knowing money and our economy? Our underlying mega question at An Economy of Our Own is this one: how do we transform an economy waged as war into an economy waged as life? So we pieced together a quilt from these talks. You'll meet some advisory board members, including Carmen Rios and Jhumpa Bhattacharya, Jamila Medley, and Rianne Eisler. But you'll also meet Farah Tanis from Black Women's Blueprint, Ebony Perkins from Self-Help Credit Union, Cara Jabola Carolas from the Commission on Women in Hawaii, Sabine O'Hara from the University of District of Columbia, and Victoria Soto de Francesca from the LBJ Center at the University of Texas, and many more. When the film, Let's Talk About Building an Economy of Our Own, begins, you're going to hear the great cultural historian and author of Chalice and the Blade and the Real Wealth of Nations, Rianne Eisler, ask me why we hear so little about women's innovations, and my own exclamation. So we're going to show you the film here. Ellen is going to share the screen. Thank you, Ellen.
The problem, Ricky, is if you look at the academic conversation, if you look at the mainstream economic and political conversation, where is that history?
In the media, why aren't we hearing about these things?
Up to us now, isn't it? And that's
Money talks in a male voice. We trust each woman's identity is shaped and strengthened by discovery of her own economic truth.
Being in community is completely different than being on your own as an individual.
I grew up middle class in a majority Black, poor, and working class neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York. And my church home was one that embraced liberation theology and exercised it through cooperative economic activities related, as I remember them, to real estate.
My grandmother sent a very clear message that in order to take care of myself, I had to be able to provide for myself and to provide for my families.
I was only in elementary school when these things were happening, but I remember keenly seeing significant life transitions happen for my friends that were moving from public housing projects to single family homes through this understanding that pooling resources can lift us all up.
It goes all the way back to my great-grandmother, a woman who passed before my existence, but I've heard the stories and know of her and her caregiving work and how that transformed into my grandmother and it transferred into my mother. So, you know, I was always told, you're not going to do this work. You're going to go to school, you're going to do something else. And they were just so adamant about it because it was totally unappreciated and underpaid work.
The more I looked at how unresilient our healthcare system is, the more I realized that that economics was behind that. And it was like, what are we spending our money on? What are we putting our trust in financially?
There's a lot of interesting shifts that are taking place in reshaping how we think about food, our relationship to food, and the support for farmers, especially related to small regional farmers, and a lot of them are impacted by a lack of childcare as well. So there's a lot of ties back between women in the workplace, especially related to our food system.
What really drew me to this work was I was pregnant when Trump was elected. I was a parent of that premature infant at the first Women's March. And that just made a huge impact on me, seeing the anger all around me compared with the isolation that I was feeling at home. It really made me think, like, how am I living my values?
We look at solidarity economy and we go back to sort of the traditions that many of us, know that we come from, right? The traditions that many of us have either come to this country with or that have been sort of like, that our ancestors and our families have been steeped in, but that we forget because we have to fit into a particular style of economic justice.
I found that cooperative economics and its expression through the co-op business model gave me access to an opportunity to support folks in expressing their own self and community determination efforts. I'm calling in from the Headwaters Garden and Learning Center, actually, which is an eco-village I founded back in 2009. We are based on permaculture, regenerative principles.
Like, my family's from the Philippines, like I mentioned, and we had 500 years of colonization. So women haven't been free, not to romanticize, the social relations of 500 years ago either, but women haven't been free for a very long time. It's different in Hawaii, just less than 200 years ago. I mean, women and their families still have memories of what it was like to be much freer than it is today and have a society that, the myth of bartering, it wasn't transactional. It was a gift economy. And it was about community care.
We've built it as a community land trust so that it's permanently affordable housing for people who are everyday Vermonters. It's not a gated community for the 1%, which is a lot of what happens to intentional communities in Vermont.
People are fed up. And when people think about the economy that they want, I bet it's more fair. I bet it's more just. I bet it's probably more democratic. These aren't new ideas, and they're not disconnected from the ways in which people are already practicing economy in their own lives.
What would our healthcare system look like? And I also say, what would our agricultural system look like? If science hadn't been concentrated in this way, if it had also been developed over time by Indigenous people, by women, by Black and Brown people, by working class people. And I say we don't know, but one thing we do know is not like this.
If you think of our political, economic, of our worldview, it really marginalizes our conventional categories, right, left, religious, secular, Eastern, Western, Northern, Southern. Our studies of economics, our studies of society, they either marginalize or ignore the majority of humanity, women and children. That is crazy, and we need to stand reality right side up.
Moms, especially now, need to be considered essential workers, right?
Earth's ecosystems, they're overloaded. We've overloaded them. And so now we're reaping the results of not understanding that economics is not only about sources, about resources feeding the economy, but it's also about things absorbing the leftovers. Where do they get processed?
How do you even start to think about self-sufficiency when you're dealing with intergenerational trauma and when there are no resources to heal from that, so that we can flourish and so that we can be at the table, so that we can have a voice and actually achieve, all of these amazing things that we're expected to achieve, that, we're said that we are owed in this country of liberty and freedom, etc.
Think capacities are exhausted and people and overloaded, right? And it's women who have historically, they've contributed that work. If you don't get fed, if you don't sleep, if you don't get loved, where's your productivity going to come from to go to work the next day? It's not going to happen.
We went around the room, what does poverty mean to you? And our answers ranged from having to engage in survival sex, that's what poverty means to me. Suffering with a broken arm without accessing the hospital because I was undocumented. That's what poverty means to me. To not being able to get basic items like tampons and pads because they're so expensive. And so I have to use toilet paper and wads of paper towel. That's what poverty means to me.
A lot of the reason why women feel intimidated with investments and finance in general is because of the lingo. And because of, I often say that there is a language barrier. There's an assumption that everybody in the room knows so much more than you do. You're the dumbest one. You don't want to bring it up because, like you said, you may come across as if you're stupid and you're less informed. And that's the last thing you want to do. You feel like you're carrying the weight of all women on your shoulders. The secret that I learned, and it took me a long time to get to this because I felt the same way for so long. And then I realized they don't know what they're talking about either.
I really come to this not as an expert on public banking or cooperatives, but as an expert in really understanding that the way our economy is set up right now simply was not built to uplift women, in particularly Black women. So I'm bringing an intersectional lens into this discussion, and that we need to come up with alternative solutions and not even just, I mean, I love this frame of an economy of our own, but I'd also like to push us further to say that the economy writ large, which we have control over, right? The economy is made from rules that we put out there. It's not its own natural thing, right? We control the economy. We are the economy.
What I learned is how much privilege I have and how much more care work people are doing than I am, and with how much less help. And that's really started to make me inspired to start organizing parents and thinking about, if parents organized as a workforce, if we thought of ourselves as workers who are unwaged.
We need economic structures and systems that actually uplift women.
The carbon cycle that regulates our climate isn't just about fossil fuels and CO2. The carbon cycle is the unfolding of creation itself. It involves every living thing in the past, present, and future, from the tiniest organisms at the bottom of the ocean to our heartbeats. Any real solutions, therefore, will have to include all the aspects. On the one hand, that may seem like a daunting task, but on the other hand, it means that any lasting solution is likely to help solve the whole thing.
Our work really centers around looking at wealth as the economic North Star, because, you know, there's income. Income is a part of your wealth, and we think wealth is a North Star because wealth, while we're living in a capitalist society, is what affords you power, right? It's what affords you dignity. It's what allows choice.
The 99%, if we get together and if we communicate and work together, we can beat the 1%. I mean, we've got the numbers. They've got the money, but we've got the numbers.
The aim of our whole plan was, how do we use this moment not just to stimulate jobs or, you know, get women into the green infrastructure that's, you know, around a Green New Deal or what have you, but even bigger than that, completely shift the value system.
We can actually back out of the carbon mess that we're in because of the fact that new and organic and regenerative forms of agriculture actually help pull carbon out of the atmosphere. So that's why I went and started what we're calling the regeneration revolution.
And I think that we also have to understand that domination economics is bad for everyone, women, men, and children. Domination systems are trauma factories.
We're witnessing the side effects of what colonization has done to a place. You know, I say often, you know, in introducing myself, that I live in Cancer Alley, just north of the dead zone. And that being this legacy of, plantation society and petrochemical, industrial, I don't even have words for it. It's really yucko. But I'm really super excited and honored in spite of all the darkness.
Women are organizing around an analysis of feminism that's decolonial and that is rooted in a completely different value system.
It's really a legacy of liberation, right? And a legacy of looking at the world differently and living differently and ensuring safety, dignity, economic security, et cetera, all the things we know we want. Deep in our gut, we know we want it.
But looking at the world through the female lens, if you will, is one of the key ways, I think, to address some of the real serious problems we've got.
If we're going to think about the future, it doesn't need to be just about addressing the problems. It needs to be, what is that focus? What are the values that we want to see moving forward, and really getting to those, not just fixating on where the problems and where it's broken.
We know that the traditional financial systems, so traditional banks in particular, right, are continuously finding ways to extract wealth from people of color and women in America. So it's really intriguing to me to have alternative systems, again, and design them and implement them in a way that actually centers Black women, because that is the polar opposite of what we have right now.
My definition of leadership is someone who's working to make things go well around them, whether their efforts are recognized or not. So the second part of that question is where and how are women leading in the project, whether their work is recognized or not.
And for those of us who don't have a chair, we're going to have to create our own tables, or we're going to have to create a circle and sit on the ground and say, this is the table. We've named that this is the table. Let's all sit around that table.
If you think about what a regenerative economy would be, it's fundamentally female.
Talking about making an immediate change of divesting from this huge system is really scary for people. There's a comfort in it. There's a knowledge about how it operates, sort of. Kind of a knowledge of what they're doing.
A key puzzle piece fell into place when I learned that the money we use every day is created and extinguished by bank lending. Commercial banks, I was amazed to find out, not only collect interest on every dollar that passes through my hands, they are the deciders about who can borrow how much new bank credit based on one intention, which is to build their own power.
Or I had always been interested in the fact that banks, not governments, actually create our money.
We need permanent, stable value, just money, controlled by a truly representative government.
It's one of the key ways we could make the economy more like nature, is to have an ecology of currencies instead of the monoculture monetary system we have, because it really is the root of the problem. And it's a very male institution, it's very yang, and it's driving a lot of the decisions that are driving us to this eventuality.
Folks who are interested in solidarity economy need to begin talking more about it, need to begin to frame it as an alternative, need to begin to frame it as what can be the new sort of normal, because it was happening. It's been normal to many of us. Can we frame it as what can be the new normal?
Each time people organize, we're in this moment now where there's socioeconomic and political unrest. And so people are turning to collective and cooperative economic practices to meet their needs, because no one is coming to save us. But you can bet that there will be resistance to that from the establishment. And so in order for us to really move, we have to strengthen our associations of people who are doing this work together.
I hate to say it, but politics and policy is slow and it takes some patience, but we just got to keep, ramming at that door to get what we need for the sustaining, a sustaining environment for our most vulnerable women.
We need to work together to create pathways to get back home, and also knowing that our home places are up against, these rising waters and these cycles of storms. And so how can we think of our garden network as one body?
We're so used to being on the defensive and constantly being reactive to all the crap that's being put down. We don't get a chance to vision and be proactive and talk about what is the society we want to create, and then what are the institutions that'll get us there. And when you have that conversation with people, they are talking about community. They are talking about shared prosperity. They are talking about abundance, right? They are talking about understanding how we are all interconnected to one another, that our fates are intertwined.
Partners and experienced activists to develop what we're calling learning circles, more in-depth women's study groups on subjects we only introduced in our Zoom. You care about. You noticed what we saw. Ellen, I think that is right. Yeah.
So that's the conclusion of the video?
No.
No.
It
But
isn't.
There was
Hang
a
in there.
pause
There
in
we
it.
go. I hope you noticed what we saw. We believe that women united across intersections are the largest group likeliest to claim a living economy as our own. So feminist economics are not just for women. We'll be continuing Zoom of our own conversations, and we'd love to hear from you about women you've noticed and admire, solutions you care about, and economic topics you'd like to understand better. Because while feminist economics are good for all of us, our mission is focused on empowering you, which is why we're working with our partners and experienced activists to develop what we're calling learning circles, more in-depth women's study groups on subjects we only introduced in our Zooms. We're beginning with a solution that we believe has potential for dramatically changing our economic world, one that Wall Street doesn't like, and one that we won't win without further more women's support. If you think escrow is a salad green, then it's time to register for our public banking learning circle. Chances are you may not know how public banking can save the planet, close the equity gap, address systemic racism, finance education, and level the playing field for women and families. It's no coincidence that the one state with a public bank in the United States, North Dakota, not only weathered 2008's financial crash, but had a surplus in their state budget in 2009 because of their 100-year-old state-owned bank. So you can learn more about what makes public banks different, why it matters to your community, and how you can become a skilled and competent advocate. Our Zoom series of 6 meetings is going to kick off on Friday, August 27th at 8 p.m. Eastern, and it's going to go through the fall. Registration is limited this first time to just 20, so register at our website as soon as you can. So there's much more to do. We need to invest in what women are told Americans cannot afford. When you compare the United States with other developed nations, our support for women and families is truly pathetic. But here's what we know. Money is not our measure. And we also know our real wealth is our creativity and our relationships. Now, AEOO has 3 goals described in detail on our webpage with descriptions of how to finance policies we recommend, and I'm going to touch on them briefly here. This invest in peaceable, livable lives is the time of our lives. We need to challenge why the old 40-hour work week standard to support a family is now 80 to 100 hours. We need a social wealth index to make family, community, and environmental care visible as the best way to ensure economic well-being. We need pay equity, a $15 minimum wage, but why stop there? We want a 30-hour work week standard for 40 hours pay. Now, if that sounds crazy to you, Iceland is already experimenting, and no coincidence, they've had many female prime ministers and many female legislators. Technology has increased our efficiency, as it always has, And this digital technology should grant us not just billionaires, but ample family leave time and universal vacations for our rest and our renewal. Our second goal, of course, we need to shift from fossil fuel to a Green New Deal, publicly financed. Health care and child care for all is the real bottom line for sustainability. And finally, we need to invest in universal basic needs. The richest nation on earth can afford housing, education, safe local farming, food, water and waste systems, roads and bridges and capital for small businesses. Our lack comes from this economy's purpose. Every political issue today is really economics and who gets to decide, money kings or the people, and including women of all races this time. While we are waging life on Main Street for our health and our happiness, Wall Street is still waging economic war for global domination. That's a fool's goal. With our forests burning, our seas rising, and a deadly virus mutating. Crashing economics bro culture, women are delivering macroeconomic policies for fair trade, fair taxes, debt-free currencies, and an end to corporate personhood with a bought and paid for political system. You can learn more about all this on our webpage, and those of our partners, their organizations, link there too. Now, if all of this sounds too hard, I want you to remember the energy and the excitement of that amazing 2017 Women's March all across the nation and the ones that followed. Each of us really need only take our own small steps to make it a movement. Remember too, the female that all of us depend on, our Mother Earth. She needs rights and protection against violence too. Yeah, so in Women We Trust, and there's another asterisk here, and it's for the men who love us. We know there are many of you, yet too many still find it hard to respect women's leadership, women's voices, and women's ways of knowing, especially in the world of money. Women's leadership is and must be different and as innovative and all in as our foremothers, first twisting fibers together, or first planting seeds, or reinventing what has been cast aside as old-fashioned. We need something fast and circular to cut through old ways of thinking about money and livelihoods and each other. So please join our movement. Stay in touch. There's lots of ways to do that. Our webpage, our social media, our newsletter, our giving circle. You can register for a Zoom of your own or a learning circle and send us your suggestions. Thanks again for this time to share with you. So let's stop the slideshow now and we'll welcome your questions and your comments in just a moment. We're going to talk woman to woman economics. Thanks again. Well, we do have a chat available, a space. If you look at the bottom of the screen there, you'll see a little window that says chat, and you can pose your questions there to everyone, and we'll be happy to talk with you about them.
Laura Dewey asks, may I be provocative? Can a fair economy exist under capitalism?
Oh, the isms. Is it socialism or is it capitalism? The real question, I mean, this is something that Riane Eisler talks about a lot. And I really respect her ideas about that. She says, if you look at either one of these systems, which were probably pretty well influenced by masculine ideas, you're going to find dominators, and you're going to find people who are more interested in working together. You're going to find power dynamics that are power over other people and power dynamics that are partnering with other people and making it more equal. So you're going to find those in both of those isms, socialism or capitalism. Is there a way to a more compassionate capitalism? I believe so, although maybe we haven't tried it yet. It's what we have now, and capital really is money, is the means to financing in the way that we've done so here in this country for 200 years. So I can't say I'm totally against capitalism, but I am against neoliberal trickle-down economic ideas that clearly have only enhanced inequality and made the divisions even wider. So I think what we need is the kind of blending of and a new idea about solidarity and community, and I think the dynamic of private and public, which is part of most people don't think about our money being created by private banks creating currency out of debt. We're virtually circulating IOU notes with one another. And as some of the people said in our film, there might be other ways to do that. And of course, Mary Sanderson is going to be talking about that with a presentation tomorrow. We've had lots of great conversations about this. What would those currencies look like? There are already a lot of different complementary currencies that are existing and successfully operating, or at least they were before COVID. I haven't been able to check on those recently, but if you go, I just went to a department store, Kohl's, and this is, I have nothing to do with them, so other than as a shopper, but I received what they call Kohl's cash, which is a kind of currency. Sometimes people will, businesses will want to finance a project in future, and they'll say, well, if you our local theater did this when they had a fire. They invited people to buy tickets ahead of time to front some cash, and in return they got a larger return on a currency that the local theater created. So those kinds of things are possible, and really just take our creativity of thinking about.
In a way, the pandemic has really forced people to think about these alternatives a little more realistically. Here in Iowa City, some of the most popular small locally owned restaurants sold shares during this period of time to get people to invest and say that they would purchase 1 or 2 or 3 meals a week during the pandemic, so that they had the advanced capital to keep paying their cooks and staff. And people were happy to do it because they didn't want those restaurants to stop being available. This is a conversation that we have a lot at Women, Money, and Democracy and at AEOO. David Corton, who was on the advisory board when we first started out, had a very extreme idea about getting rid of capitalism. He wanted us to throw everything out the window right away. And what we told him was that the reality is that most women have to find ways to make a life and a livelihood now in the capitalism we've got. So the women that are in our Zooms of our own are coming up with innovative ways to create solidarity economies, cooperative business models, collaborative efforts, and collaborative housing models that are transitional ways to get from where we are now to where we want to be. And what they're finding is that when people pull together, As one of the women said in our little film there, not to contribute what's left over, but to share what our resources are. We are able to envision together and therefore take next steps to get to an economy where everything we care about and value is worth the effort and has a monetary value as well as an intrinsic value. We know that if we don't put a monetary value on our own work, it won't be appreciated. It will never be fully funded. And so these are some of the things that we talk about all the time on this committee. And like Rickey said, tomorrow's presentation about reforming and re-envisioning money is going to be the next step. It's going to be a very thoughtful and energetic discussion, very, very inspirational. So I hope that you'll join that. And I hope that you'll consider joining Women, Money, and Democracy. What we've noticed, Rickey put it so well when she said, we're interested in an economy that wages life, not war. What we've realized, all of us at WILPF, is that when you pour funding into weaponry and war, there's not enough of it to do the things that truly matter to people. So let's work together to find how we can re-envision an economy that works for all of us. And please do sign up for that learning circle on public banking because, you know, there's a really good reason that the Indigenous Environmental Network has prioritized public banking as a major tactic in climate change, addressing climate change. It's very important. And if you don't know anything about it, look it up and sign up for our learning circle. There are only 20 places available, and there are only 6 sessions that go through the fall. So I hope that you'll do that. And I think Paula had a question about, where is it? What is a women's giving circle? Right, why don't you take that, Rickey?
What is the giving circle?
What is a women's giving circle? I think she meant a learning circle, but maybe you could talk about both.
I'll talk about both. I mean, circles are certainly, as that circular saw demonstrated, and as nature itself demonstrates with its circular systems, seems to be especially female. And so when we designed the learning circles, we thought really just a peer group with, yes, experienced activists who would be leading the way and suggesting reading, and yet it wouldn't be a classroom with a lecturer at the front, you know, in a hierarchical kind of situation, but it would be a more collaborative kind of learning. And so that was important to us. And we'd really love to hear your ideas and your questions about other learning circles you might be interested in. For instance, one of the most common questions are, you know, what do I do about personal finance? Well, there are tons of books out there about women and personal finance, but I do think, you know, a learning circle designed to be a bit subversive, to be a bit not the usual, would be really valuable. So I'm thinking about that and as a possibility. The giving circle is about our need to, you know, the property that we're playing on right now, this Zoom world, this digital world, is really not ours, is it? It's not public. We pay rent for it, and so there is a certain cost. It's to our providing a platform for women to join together to talk about economics. And so we thought about, well, should we apply to Melinda Gates for some grant money? And we thought, probably not, because we're not interested in business as usual. We're not interested in promoting. We don't think the world is going to be improved by more women billionaires, right? So a giving circle is simply a means to regularly give what you can to sustain this effort. And it wouldn't take that many of us to, give $10 a month or whatever you could afford, $5 a month, to sustain our little effort here with building an economy of our own, or just building a space to enable women to talk about building an economy of our own and coming up with specific actions and specific recommendations that might be an alternative to socialism or capitalism. Maybe there's some brand new thing that we haven't imagined yet. Oh, you're muted, Mary Beth.
Sorry, I was coughing, so I muted. Louise Lisi says, this morning, Dr. Vandana Shiva discussed the control of much agriculture by agribusiness and the harm that it's doing to Mother Earth and small farms. Can you comment on how an economy of our own could foster healthy foods and local healthy farming? Well, I want to start by saying that public banks can deny a great deal of funding of public money that goes now to support Wall Street banks. They take our tax money, our pension, our public pension funds, our speeding ticket money that goes into cities and states, and they use it to finance extractive industries all over the world that contribute to climate change, and they use it to pay for lobbyists to silence the rest of us. So let's stop giving these big banks our money if we could possibly do it.
Right.
But what else can you say about the healthy food and local healthy farming, Rickey?
Well, we have talked about that quite a bit in the conversation about feminist future. Karen Basarab is with the Johns Hopkins Center for what is the name of it? Sustainable Future, and she's quite the expert on food systems. And one of the things she commented on was the number of women who are involved in food systems issues and advocating for local healthy food. So we're really important to that movement. We've also talked about it in the conversation that we titled From the Ground Up, where we're talking about regenerative agricultural practices and its connection to clean water, to diminished poisons and all of the things that Vandana Shiva was talking about as well. We think it's really, food. Women are involved with food, ideally 3 times a day, right? Just shopping for it, growing it in their own gardens, making plans for cooking it. And corporations are moving in on that task so that we have these, little individual frozen meals that our supermarkets are full of these days. But there are other kind of collective ways that we could be, and many people are, providing affordable, nutritious food. And so, yeah, it's a big concern of ours. Food is so basic, isn't it? Water too. Yeah.
Nancy Price says, how about a learning circle on helping women establish co-ops? That would be a great one.
That is a great idea. Yeah.
And one on cooperative housing models.
No kidding. That would be great. So, the devil is in the detail with these things. You can learn about these ideas that are out there, but when you get into, town, what do you call it, zoning and kind of the details of making such a thing happen. That's where a learning circle could be very useful, where you bring together women who've had experience creating a co-op, perhaps, or working in a co-op, and they're leading a learning circle that would get into those devilish details.
Beatrice Schultes wants to know, can we start investing without a great amount of money? I think she's talking about the giving circles.
Well, if she's talking about the giving circle, yeah. I mean, our learning circle is available for $1 a session. So $6 will get you in, even though we think it's valued at more at 120 if we were being fair to ourselves. But we're not really interested in being fair. We're interested in all of us being, I think we're all capable of being far more generous, don't you? I mean, I think we're happier when we're generous and can share. And so that's the kind of thing that we're hoping for. Investment circles are another possibility. I know of some organizations that are already doing that kind of work. And investment circles with women's investment circles have a really good track record for finding stable investments. They tend to do better because they're less interested in taking wild risks and getting a lot richer. They just want to be able to survive as old ladies.
Gloria McMillan says, my field is rhetoric. Some women in banking are invested in business as usual. Shouldn't you be in there trying to get them involved and less polarized? Well, as one of our people said in the film, it's safe to keep things the way they are. Even though we don't like it, we know what to expect. It's hard to start something brand new that could fail. It could, it might not succeed immediately. And insecurity is very hard to deal with. But I think our efforts at public banking are a great way to get ordinary people involved. And we're hoping that some of the women who join us will be from the banking community and they can reality test our theories.
Yeah. And in fact, I've been keeping tab on, there are a number of states and municipalities that are pushing forward legislation and talking about these issues. And earlier I said that the bigger the pile of money, the fewer women you're going to find. Well, it turns out that most of the women managers are much more prevalent in the credit union world than they are in the banking world. And many credit unions are behind the Massachusetts and the New York effort because they see a public bank that will help back them in making riskier loans to be a plus for them. Because again, it's about collaboration and cooperation rather than competition and trying to be the winner in all of it.
Yeah, I think that Gloria says, how will you approach these traditional women? Well, I think even traditional women recognize that the world is not working well. Yeah. Things are broken. And what we're trying to do through public banking is to appeal to folks who are in kind of different segments. If you look at that public banking toolkit, there's a chapter on how public banking can help with climate change, and another one on how it can help provide more affordable mortgages, and another one on community building and what's in it for communities of color. Why would they benefit from this? So I think segmenting our audience by their interests is really what's going to help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to say that my book, Screwnomics, is really a kind of memoir of my hitting heads with my mother, who was very much a traditional, Fox News viewer, who had very different ideas about the economy and how to to do well. And she died just as the 2008 crash happened. And I often ask myself, you know, what would she think about where we have come since 2008? She wouldn't have been happy to know that her one source of wealth, her home, had lost $30,000 overnight, you know, in value. I wonder what conversations we might have had together had she lived. It's hard to know, but it is something that we all are dealing with at Thanksgiving time, right? We all have family members who are watching Fox News and who are as afraid as we are of things going wrong, but they have different answers. So engaging in dialogue with them is so, so important.
I keep this book next to my desk. And it's well marked, you see.
Oh my gosh.
I refer to it a lot. In the book, Rickey tells stories of really brave women throughout the ages who challenged this male-dominated field, including several whistleblowers leading up to the 2008 crash, who risked everything to try and pull back the hands of these gambling bro boys on Wall Street. It's really kind of an amazing story. And in the Screwnomics website that I listed above has a downloadable workbook. We recommend that you consider doing small group discussions around this book and including women at different levels of economic incomes, because they'll have different takes on the discussion questions. So I kind of consider doing that. Cheryl says, Rickey writes for Ms. Magazine. What kind of response do you get from Ms. readers, Rickey?
That's a good question. You know, mostly it comes from social media. And people are so busy. I don't know. I used to be a newspaper editor and we would get letters to the editor and that was my favorite thing. But I don't see that happening with my digital writing. But I will tell you that I was surprised recently to hear from a woman named Jane Gleason White. I'm going to include a link to her article in the Guardian.
I'll put it in.
All right, great. Jane Gleason White is in Australia, and she's written a couple of really fine books about the financial world. One is about how Venice and the Renaissance created our current system of finance, really fine history. And another was called How Accountants Could Save the World. And it's called Six Capitals. And I sent that to my daughter, who happens to be a finance vice president in Silicon Valley, for her Christmas. But I hadn't heard from her for a while, and she wrote this remarkable article that is so incredibly moving about women's erasure, our invisibility, our not being a part of the current economic thinking. And what is it called, Mary Beth? Do you have the title there?
The title of the article?
Yeah.
It's called What Really Counts, How the Patriarchy of Economics Finally Tore Me Apart.
Yes. And it was because I knew her and because I've written about that same erasure that she's talking about. I confess I was, you know, down and out for a couple of days after I read it, but it is really well worth reading because it's that important. And by the way, she mentioned an economy of our own in the work that we're doing. She attended one of our Zooms, and so that was kind of thrilling to see. So the word is getting out there, but because I think we're all so busy emailing each other all the time, I don't know how many people are writing to authors these days.
Paula Rochelle says, what about giving circles where those of us with financial privilege and those in fragile financial situations meet together to pool our resources to help each other? Is that your image of a giving circle? We have wide economic differences in our own group. We could each help each other, but talking about our personal financial situations is still taboo. We could start in our own group to address financial inequality. A good idea or not? Or is your focus on systemic change more than personal change?
Well, I don't think there's any separating them. You know, I think economics is very personal. The patriarchy wants us to believe that it's all science and but no. It affects all of us very, very personally. And so you're right that this is a taboo subject, especially for women. And there's a lot of shame, a lot of feeling of not being adequate. Even millionaires apparently struggle with feeling like they're not, it's not enough. They've got to have more all the time, right? So I think overcoming that taboo and talking together. In fact, in Screwnomics, each chapter ends with an econo-girlfriend question to engage with your friends so that you can talk about these issues together. Usually when we get together and talk, we don't bring this subject up because it is taboo, as you say, but I think that has to change. And yeah, I think that personal kind of giving circle would be a great idea.
I think it would be great to do some sort of neighborhood or community giving circle so that your local money would stay with your neighbors. And setting that up could be as easy as a community foundation trust or gift, but it could be much more personal than that too. You could actually set up a giving circle in a neighborhood. And that way people wouldn't have to come hat in hand and have a personal embarrassment. They could just apply for funding and have an intermediary who's not necessarily one of the neighbors channel the money. So yeah, I think that might be a very good way to proceed.
I don't think it will be easy. I think money is a bit of a sticky wicket for a lot of people, and it is connected with this whole idea of who's done enough and do they deserve it, and privileged people very often feel quite comfortable about deserving what they have, but maybe all of us should think more about, as Patty Machek said in our film, about how privileged most of us are. If we're on Zoom now, we're probably pretty privileged.
Sue says, I have to say that having lived in several shared living situations where we tried to compensate for people having very different resources is very hard. Yes, I think that's true.
Yeah.
I think all of us have stories like that where we've kind of been taken to the cleaners. But, I had a friend once who we would walk through Port Authority in New York, and there were always beggars around, and I would always give them something, 50 cents, $1, and she would always laugh at me and say, they're just going to take that money and buy booze or drugs. And he said, yeah, probably, but every other one that's on the level, I don't want to have not helped. So if you give a little, to people who ask, inevitably you're going to make a difference. And helping doesn't have to always be about money.
Right.
We heard that from the members of our Zooms of our own, that especially women of color have been supporting each other by watching each other's kids 2 days a week or 2 afternoons a week, splitting grocery bills, go to Costco and get one of those huge sleeves of things and split it up among people who need it. You could do all of that. And Nancy says, how about a participatory budgeting circle? That was one of the things that Rickey and I talked about initially when we started trying to put together this partnership. And it's something that we really want to get to do. I can't tell you enough how much work there is that could be done and how much more we could do if we had more members of the Women, Money, and Democracy Committee or people who were active at an economy of our own. So please consider being more active on both of those efforts. I think we could do all of these sorts of exciting projects, but we can't do it when we have limited capacity. There are only 24 hours in the day.
That's what I was just thinking, 24 hours in a day, the great equalizer, right? Well, it is time for us to wrap up. I'm very grateful for having this time with you, and very, very grateful for Mary Beth Gardam and for WILPF. Without you, we wouldn't be here at all. We wouldn't have done any of this, and it's kind of amazing to me that we've done what we've done, and so I thank you. Thanks so much for your time today.